The million-dollar question with the Kyle Rittenhouse saga is, how is the jury going to respond to the actual events as they unfold to them in court? I mean, a lot of these jury members are going to come in with very little understanding of what actually happened. Oh, sure, they'll know who Kyle is, and they'll know a lot of those things. They might even have some preconceived notions that Kyle is a really bad kid, but they're not going to know necessarily a lot about what happened. And the reason why is, well, take a look around you. I mean, all the discussions that you have on social media, what percentage of the people that you discussed Kyle Rittenhouse with even know the foundational facts that went on? Well, not many. And I have a feeling that you're going to have a lot of wide-eyed jurors that are going to be sitting down and listening to all of the facts and evidence unfold in front of them. How are they going to respond? Well, what we have here is a panel of people. These are mostly older, retired people. They tend to hang out on the liberal side for the most part. There's a couple of conservatives in there, but they're pretty liberal. And you can sort of tell Central Coast California, yeah, they're not going to be very hardline conservatives. So watch as they talk about what took place in Kenosha and their impressions of Kyle Rittenhouse over time as the discussions go on.
So this is a completely new kind of event. We are all participating in an experiment here tonight. And the nature of the experiment is this. Randy Lioz, who is the Braver Angels California State Coordinator, wrote an essay about the Kyle Rittenhouse shootings in Kenosha that we thought was so extraordinary that we wanted to share it and talk about it. It's a piece from a very unexpected perspective. And for me, the power of the essay was that it showed me clearly how I had viewed the event through my own biased lens, based on my own biased political perspective.
One of the things about the Braver Angels is that they typically come in with fairly defined political biases, but they're willing to take on events and analyze them through a different lens. And so the word braver there is talking about the bravery, the courage necessary to sort of question your own political beliefs.
And that was quite a shock, since I think of myself as a kind of reasonable person, as I bet most of us do. And it was a real wake-up call for me to remember that things are not always what they seem at first glance, and even more so that there's always more to the story.
That is especially true in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. The more we learn, the more questions we get. This is a very sophisticated case that has a lot of moving parts.
So the way we're going to organize this is that Randy will read a section from his essay, show some relevant videos, and pose a couple of simple questions for us. And then we'll open the floor for people to speak. If you want to speak, please raise your Zoom hand. So when Randy has finished one section, I'll invite speakers. We're not going to make an effort to alternate red and blue, because this isn't really a red-blue issue.
She talks about alternating between red and blue, so evidently she's trying to collect a panel of liberals and conservatives. My gut feeling is that the conservatives on the panel are not terribly conservative.
In the interest of keeping this a good experience for us all, please remember that we are speaking from our real heartfelt convictions or doubts, and we are not trying to convert one another or prove each other wrong. We follow the normal rules of politeness. We don't interrupt, we listen, we are respectful. We're trying to understand each other's experiences and feelings and beliefs. We're not trying to convert each other or argue.
Okay, thanks very much, Susan.
You're welcome.
The events in Wisconsin late last month, I think, truly made our collective heart ache. Following a cycle of increasing polarization for decades on end, and the violent paroxysms of the past few months, the last week of August into September was a soul-rending chain of unmitigated pain. The horrific shooting of Jacob Blake set off a renewed wave of protests in which the ultimate price has been paid by supporters of each side. This felt, and still feels, like the most dangerous moment for our country that I have ever experienced, at least in my half a lifetime. And what creates this danger is our constant habit of viewing the actions of our opponents in the worst possible light in order to achieve our full moral separation, our maintenance of the view of ourselves as in the right and them in the wrong.
I would go a little bit further. I think that we're painting our opponents in the worst possible light because we want to score political victories. We want Kyle to be really, really nasty and bad and put him in jail forever because it makes the people on the other side uncomfortable and angry. It's a nice jab on the other side. And of course, this goes both ways.
We're constantly nudged one way or the other in our interpretation of the intentions and the motivations of those we disagree with. And when we add up all those little nudges, it puts us on the other side of a vast gulf. These are usually subtle distortions of the truth, and they don't, in fact, serve us the way we have intended. They just push us towards less understanding of our foes, while failing to sway the opinions of others toward our viewpoint. And most unmistakably, provoking the fierce defensiveness of those opponents. Let's take the case of Kyle Rittenhouse, the 17-year-old who was captured on video, shooting 3 people, killing 2 of them, during the protests against the Blake shooting in Kenosha, Wisconsin. To the left, he's a monster. He's a mass shooter who came to Kenosha looking for trouble and found it, and when confronted for it, took the cowardly way out. To the right, he's a patriot who came to help free the city of Kenosha from the violence and destruction of rioters, to support the police in their mission to keep the streets safe, to clean up after vandals, who even sought to give aid to anyone harmed that night on either side. Of course, neither of those images is even remotely complete.
And as I've said before, I don't like painting Kyle Rittenhouse as a hero. And he's talking about that very thing. And that is, we're trying to increase this split between the two sides in this whole battle, but it doesn't do Kyle any good. He ends up being a pawn caught between 2 warring factions.
Since the story of how Rittenhouse got into this situation is, as usual, complex and heartbreaking, and at points, even a bit pitifully funny. So I have some questions for the group, and this doesn't involve video quite yet, but hopefully you folks are fairly familiar with the story of what happened. And so the questions are, is this a Rorschach test for our politics? Is this a situation in which whatever you're looking for in an incident, you can find it?
Yes, and more than any event that I can recall in the last 40, 50 years, well, as long as I've been living, this case here represents all that you could ever want if you have a certain political bent and you're looking for ammo. And therefore, if you are pro-Second Amendment, you're pro-life, you're anti-racist, if you're Republican, Democrat, whatever cranks you up, this case has it.
Is it true that many other events, like the Covington Catholic case, if y'all remember that, I certainly thought the same thing of that case in the moment, or nearly all events that we see on TV? Is this true that it is that we see many Rorschach tests, that basically whatever we are looking for, we can find?
Okay, so I am looking for a blue hand and I see Susan Rico. Susan, could you unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question or make your comment?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, no, I just want to say what an extraordinary essay that Randy wrote that was so powerful and one of the most just amazing things I've read in a long time. So kudos to Randy. I think he was honest in his approach to this. And yes, it's a Rorschach test in that I think we can all see ourselves clearly on one side or the other of this, but when you delve into the particulars of this event and many other events like Covington, when you watch the entire video, like it's a very long video, Ferguson, when you delve into all the details, I've done it on a few of these cases, not all of them, but when you delve into them deeply, they're always more complicated, and I can always see arguments on both sides that are valid. So that's all I have to say.
Perfect timing. Thank you, Susan. Vicky, I see your hand is raised. Would you like to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question or make your comment?
I think this will be rather comical because Randy drew sort of polarization between the right and the left in their reactions to this. I had a different take altogether, but it shows that it is a Rorschach test because what I took away from it was that this was a case of toxic masculinity. I didn't think of left or right. I thought, what a horrible problem these young men have, that they have to prove their masculinity. They have to carry guns and they have to shoot their guns. And some of the video that Randy came up with kind of showed that this was a male thing. He got himself involved in an argument about this woman. We don't know the background of that.
I have no idea what she's talking about.
But I just wanted to say that I think there are many different ways of looking at a situation and not just right or left. In my case, it was men versus women and toxic masculinity.
Okay, that's fine. I would just like to remind everybody, though, that toxic masculinity she's talking about, that's the same toxic masculinity that has driven a lot of our boys to join the military, to join the police force. And one of the reasons why we don't speak Japanese today, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but in times of war, in times of super strife, that toxic masculinity comes in very handy. And I'd also like to recommend that this whole thing about women joining the military and all that stuff is all about them acquiring the same toxic masculinity that they see the men having. So they want the girls to portray the same toughness and the same imagery of warrior as the men. So how can you call it a negative when you promote women doing the same thing?
Absolutely. Good point. Yeah. Does anybody else, Barbara, I see you have your hand raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us.
Yeah, I do think it is a Rorschach test. I think most everything that we experience is a Rorschach test in a way. I'm thinking of, for those of you that read The Righteous Mind, Jonathan Haidt's idea that we go around looking for events that prove the narrative that that we want to promote. And when we see different events, we tend to look at them in terms of either proving or disproving that narrative. And it's easy for both sides to look at the same event and say, yeah, it's, it demonstrates our narrative. But I wanted to respond to something that Vicki said, because there is yet another way of looking at this aside from toxic masculinity. And that is, and I think Randy actually alluded to this, maybe even somewhat explicitly brought it out in his article, and that is that there is something missing in the lives of many young people today. And that is that sense of belongingness. I didn't see it much as a, toxic masculinity, but I mean, I could see there's an edge of that in this, that there's a need for young people to want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And it's difficult for them to find. And for young men, they do tend to be drawn towards the heroic image, and I think that was the case with Kyle Rittenhouse. He was a victim too. He was a victim of something missing in our society, in our communities now, that I think really needs to be rectified.
Okay, so a few things. First of all, her comment that when we hear stories, we're always looking for things that sort of affirm our political leanings. Yeah, and in fact, you know it, because every time we have a mass shooting, what happens? People dive onto Twitter and they're eager to look up, is he black or is he white? Did he use one of those AR-15s? And so you see it and they come in, they say, I bet it's an AR-15. I bet it's an AR-15. Oh no, it's only a semi-automatic weapon. Darn. Or another one would be, oh, we had a mass shooting. He's white. Yes, that's how they operate now. And keep in mind, both sides do this. I mean, this is all everybody. Whenever we hear of a horrible event, the first thing we do is we go on and see if we can find elements of that story that match our political narrative so that we can use it as ammo against our political opponents. As for looking to be a hero, that is time immemorial. Go back to all of the early Vikings and stuff. It was all about that. And is it limited to white males? No. The whole superhero thing is all founded on this. It's heroism. You know, you have Black Panther, so we got black people now wanting to be superheroes, and then we have Wonder Woman, and now the women want to be superheroes. Everybody wants to be a superhero, and they sit there, watch these movies, and they project themselves into those roles. And this escapism, you know, like Rambo and all that, it was all about that. This goes back to time immemorial. And guess what? It comes in very handy because we often need people who are ready to step up and drive it through. Sometimes the heroes are what saves the day. And so what's wrong with people wanting to be heroes? I'll tell you what's worse, everybody wanting to be a coward, because you don't gain much from that.
Thank you, Barbara, very much. I see Gordon has his hand raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
I don't know. I doubt very much whether the situation in my childhood was similar. Imagine I'm 14 years old and there is 5 of us on our bicycles. We have 22s slung on our backs, and we are riding out of town to go poking away with our guns. And people wave at us, said, "Have a good time, boys." No one concerned themselves. No one said anything. To see children with weapons, at least where I grew up in this town, was nothing. Absolutely nothing. There were, every pickup truck had a dog in the back and at least one rifle on the gun rack right behind the seat. That's changed somewhat, but I'm not quite, and it certainly is masculine as opposed to feminine. Although there are women who feel that way about guns now, but I'm hesitant to judge him simply because of his embrace of guns. Guns were fun.
Right.
That's my childhood.
Thank you, Gordon. Does anybody else want to say anything or make a comment or ask a question? Okay, I think, Randy, let's move on to the next section. Vicky, I see your dog. Is that a dog or a cat? Oh, no, it's a cat. Okay, Randy.
This performance, as I think it can be accurately termed, started well before last week, with Rittenhouse getting into a fight on July 1st, which resulted in him punching a girl multiple times, caught on video. I don't know about any other history of violence he might have had, but I can imagine a scenario in which he saw this as one of his first real moments to make his presence felt by standing up to someone who had picked a fight with his friend. Never mind that someone was smaller than him. Fast forward to the day of the shootings, and you can see his tense excitement.
I'm not sure who he's talking about, but the girl that he was hitting was not smaller than him. And the friend is actually, I think, his sister.
As he declares his role in the protection of property and safety to a reporter from the Daily Caller, Richard McGinnis, calling it his job and promising to rush into harm's way for anyone under threat, including the reporter himself. And now we have some video of that to watch, so here we go.
People who are armed as well.
Protect me.
Gotcha. And then what about these guys up on the roof?
Their job is to provide overwatch to protect me also.
Gotcha.
They're protecting everybody on the run, protecting each other.
Understood. And
We're running medical, and we're going in and we're getting control.
and what about, are you from the area?
I am from the area.
What brought you out here tonight? You just wanted to provide medical attention?
Provide medical attention to people that need it. If somebody's injured, like you get hurt, I'm grabbing you.
Have you encountered any issues yet thus far with law enforcement or anything like that?
We were trying to come and set a fire at the church. So we went to the church and we de-escalated the situation, telling them they need to leave or they will be detained and arrested.
This church right over here.
That church right there. and we stopped the fire out all the way down at the school.
Wow. And do you think it would have been different if the police had?
So just if you didn't hear him, he said that people were trying to set fire to the church, and they diffused that situation.
And that fire might have been set by Joseph Rosenbaum. Nothing confirmed, but Ryan Balch said that Joseph Rosenbaum was involved in that arson.
All right, so I'm going to continue reading. We're running medical, and we're going in and getting people. Rittenhouse also claims to have helped stop 2 local buildings from being set ablaze, including a church, surmising that he and his group were able to de-escalate the situation more effectively than the police would have. And in fact, earlier in the day, he made an unambiguously positive contribution, helping to scrub graffiti off a local school, which might lend credence to the idea that even if he were inflating his sense of self-importance, he at least wished to use it for good.
And this whole idea of inflating one's self-importance, he's 17 years old. We all kind of did that when we were 17.
But as we continue following McGinnis's video, the role-playing gets even more absurd. Rittenhouse is joined by an older man who suggests they go see if there are any injuries they can attend to as medical personnel. That man turned out to be Ryan Balch, a follower of the Boogaloo Boy movement that has been preparing for a race war.
Well, it's not certain that he is really a follower of the Boogaloo Boys. He denies it. There is some evidence in his social media past that he was a follower at one time. So I would not put that down as a given. On the stand, he's going to probably deny it.
They had met earlier in the day, and Balch apparently took him under his wing for a while. As we follow this walk, perhaps the most desperate and cringeworthy declaration of the night is uttered. And it comes not from Rittenhouse, but from the man who's taken charge of his well-being. Let's take a look at that.
Me and him are out here running and seeing if people need medical attention.
But speaking of which, we need to go check to see if somebody got hurt again.
All right.
Understood.
If you want to follow us, you're fine.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And just a quick comment on that. He says, you want to follow us? You're following us. He definitely was craving the attention there of the reporter.
Actually, he said, are you following us? You're fine.
You're a certified EMT?
Yeah.
Gotcha. And do you work as an EMT normally?
Yes, sir. I just got thinking I'm a lifeguard normally. I got my ALS.
Gotcha.
He doesn't say that he's a certified EMT, by the way. He just says that he's a lifeguard and he's got his ALS certification. I think both of those are true.
And I'm former Army infantry, and I got a whole bunch of travel training.
All right, I'm going to pause it there. I'm going to continue to read the piece. McGinnis is asking the 17-year-old about his EMT credentials, which Rittenhouse is clearly inflating. He's actually just a lifeguard with some emergency training, a far cry from a real emergency medical technician, but then declines to inquire about Balch. So after a beat, Balch offers up, and I'm forward Army infantry. By the way, I in retrospect, I recognize that I got that wrong. He says I'm former Army infantry, so apologize for that. And I got a whole bunch of some sort of training. In this exchange, we can see an entire universe of insecurities represented, with both the underage kid with a gun and the man accompanying him, who had served in both Iraq and Afghanistan, desperate to be recognized for their importance and experience.
I don't see that at all. Ryan Balch, if anything, seems to be almost dismissive of it. It's hard to say because, remember, we can't see the cameraman, and the cameraman might have just simply pointed at Ryan like okay, he's told us what you've done. What about you? And so it looks to me like Ryan's like, yeah, former infantry, a whole bunch of stuff, and just continues to walk down the sidewalk. I don't get the sense that he's like bragging about his background at all, but that's a matter of perception. But I think he's being a little bit unfair to Ryan here. He does not know what kind of cues that Ryan Balch has taken from the cameraman.
Yeah. Does anybody need medical? medical.
What, yesterday or today?
Today. Dude, he just had it up the gun. Talking about get off the car. Now he's talking about medical.
What car? Over in the dealership?
Car
Sorry,
down
I don't
there.
know.
So the scene takes its first dark turn as we see Rittenhouse announcing medical in another awkward attempt to be taken seriously as a courageous defender of public safety. As he walks up to a group of young black men, we immediately get a clearer picture of what he's been up to earlier in the day. One of them tells McGinnis that Rittenhouse had shooed him away from a car at gunpoint. By this time, having been confronted with this, Rittenhouse has already moved on, not denying the accusation, but continuing to shout offers of medical help.
Okay, got to be a little careful here. Just because Mr. Yellow Pants there made a claim doesn't make it true. And also, just because Kyle Rittenhouse walked away doesn't mean that he's acknowledging the guy's statements. It could be that Kyle just saw it and said, oh, come on, and just walked away. You don't know if the person there is lying or he's maybe mistaken Kyle for somebody else. It's not clear also what he is saying. Randy here is making a claim that he said something about shoot him or something. I didn't hear that. I listened to it pretty carefully. I think he's misunderstanding.
So we've got some discussion questions here. So first of all, how relevant are Rittenhouse's actions earlier in the day or month to understanding his intentions, including the fight and the school graffiti cleanup? And my additional question is, can those who believe that he was guilty of wrongfully shooting those protesters still give him credit for wanting to protect and improve the community? And the next question is, do we believe that hanging around white supremacists cast guilt upon Kyle? Was it his responsibility to check out anyone he's been hanging out with at the protests? Is that even realistic? And bear in mind that he's a 17-year-old looking for approval and acceptance, and Balch is an adult with military experience.
Okay, does anybody have a comment or a question? I'm looking for blue hands. Yeah, oh wait, no, sorry, I thought somebody was raising their actual hand. No comments, no questions.
I see Deborah Lafferty.
Oh, there we go, Deborah, I'm sorry. Deborah, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there were any people in the space where Kyle is that actually were in need of medical attention or help. He's offering it and calling it out and everything, but were there people there that were in need? I'm just curious.
Yeah, from what I saw earlier in the day or the night, he had actually given some medical attention to at least one person. I think maybe more than one. So yeah, there were people who needed medical attention. I think there were various people, including actually a figure that we'll see later, Gage Grosskreutz, who had a gun, but he also had a medical pack. And I believe he also attended to someone earlier in the day.
I'll have to give it up to Randy. He's being very fair. I don't agree with everything he's saying, and I think he's got a certain twist on certain things, but he's actually bending over backwards to project what he knows and has learned, and he hasn't buried anything. It's not like he's ignored certain actions that took place that night. He knows that Kyle did try to help this one injured protester with a leg injury. We don't know if Kyle was actually very successful or not, but he certainly tried. And he saw it, and he's actually bringing it up to everybody's attention. Good for him. If everybody did that, and if everybody was willing to listen, maybe we would have fewer misconceptions about what took place that night.
Marietta, would you go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us what you'd like to say or ask?
Sure. This may not be the place that you're looking for such a comment, but I'm just struck so hard by the tragedy, just the tragedy of this young man who was influenced and perhaps needed some sort of parental tragedy, just the tragedy of this young man who was influenced and perhaps needed some sort of parental input or some other mentoring other than just being out there apparently alone and potentially influenced by the situation and by people that are there. I do believe his intentions probably were. I can see that they may have been benign. and positive, but it's just a situation that's so fraught with danger. I can't understand how someone in his life couldn't have influenced him to not be there in such a situation without some sort of accompaniment by a person that he knew and trusted.
I think that's a little harsh. It's a little bit of a backhanded slap at Wendy Rittenhouse, but she had no way of knowing he was at the protest. Let's face it, he's 17 years old. He's like all 17-year-olds. I mean, he's got a gun and he's got his friends. They're going to go and do some great things. He wants to go along with them. I mean, nothing he has done that day is unlike anything that a lot of 17-year-olds themselves would have done. Keep in mind, at 17, you don't see around corners. And also, that is the ripe age at which we pull people to do heroic things like go walk around in dangerous areas and deliver medical aid. You don't see 40 or 50-year-old people volunteering for that kind of work. Well, not too often. Take a look at your armies. They're not made up of 50-year-old people. They're mostly made of what? In their early 20s.
Susan.
Oh, yes. So I totally hear Marietta and what she's saying. But I'm not sure his intentions were totally benign or benevolent, and that there was some indication earlier on that he was looking for some fame out of this event.
That's true for almost everybody. It's hard to find anybody willing to do something great for everybody without getting at least some recognition for it. And especially when you're 17 years old, remember, he's had troubles in high school. He's had troubles with friends. This is an opportunity to get a little bit of pride in something and get recognized for it. Who would turn that down? I don't think I would have, not at that age. I'm not sure I would have turned it down at my age.
Like there was a craving for recognition or fame. So I think in that maybe that addresses the question, or is earlier actions and words relevant? And I think they are in context. So
the craving of fame, that pretty well describes all of Hollywood, all of celebrities. We have no trouble with them.
I do understand he thought he was wanting to do good, but I think there was a deeper issue of wanting some attention.
He wants to do good and he wants to be recognized for it. No problem. I have no issue with that. Take a look. Look at your soldiers and all their ribbons. Do you think that they turned down that opportunity to get a ribbon on their chest? Do you think that they ever wear those in public? Of course they do. You have 70-year-old men who are generals, and they show up at parties, and they got their full dress blues on, and they got a whole slab of medals. For a kid to want to do some good things and maybe get his picture up on Facebook, I don't see any problem with it.
Barbara, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, this is a question kind of in response to Marietta. I thought I read somewhere that his mother actually drove him there. Does anybody
that was
hear
a
that
rumor
or read that somewhere?
That was a rumor that was unsubstantiated.
Okay.
Yeah, that is not what happened.
Okay, good. Well, I'm happy to hear that as a mother.
It's a rumor that was unsubstantiated and irresponsible. Where did it come from? People just made it up. It sounded good. They made an assumption. But it sounded so juicy to just have his mother drive up to the protest and, and of course she pulls up right to the picket line, and drops him off with his AR-15 and drives off. The imagery of that sounds so appealing. And so what did they do? They just fabricated it.
I couldn't imagine.
Randy, what was his exact comment about wanting to be famous? I think that's in your article as well.
Yeah, so he did post something on his social media accounts that said just trying to be famous, something like that.
This is before the shooting, by the way.
On his Instagram or TikTok?
Yeah, I think it might have been TikTok. Yeah.
Okay, I see Mariana has her hand raised. Mari, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks. I completely agree with Susan, but I also, looking at this video again, I'm kind of thinking now that the reporter might have exacerbated, or his actions might have been more relevant than I previously thought, because it just seemed like Kyle was in more so of a place to go along with what he was originally thinking. And it might have been his questions, like the reporter's questions, that made him say some of the stuff because he had that attention. And I'm just questioning now if he would have said some of those things if the reporter wasn't there.
Very good point. And I should have a video on this, actually. When the reporter, this is a guy from the Daily Caller, and Ryan Balch walks up to Kyle and says, we need to go and look for injured. Do you think Kyle's going to turn around in front of a camera and say, no, you go on ahead. I think I'll just stay here where it's safe? Of course he's not. There isn't a 17-year-old boy on the planet that would have said that. That would be embarrassing to be hell. So guess what? He's going to say, yeah, let's go. And he invites the reporter to come along with him. That's normal human behavior. So are Kyle's actions sort of puffed up because he has a camera on him? Of course. And guess what? We would all be the same way.
Thank you. Vicky, go ahead and unmute yourself.
This is a small point, but if you look at the video about his helping to erase the graffiti, he is looking back at the camera while he's doing it, like, hi, it's me doing this good deed. And that sort of rubbed me the wrong way, that if he was really that interested in doing the graffiti, he should have been dealing with it. What I didn't notice was what kind of graffiti it was and whether it was a left or a right kind of stance that it took. But I felt like he was doing a performance rather than sincerely doing the deed itself.
She is so embedded in politics that here's Kyle cleaning up graffiti. She has to know, well, was that leftist or rightist graffiti? Like, what difference would it make? And so that's her question. By the way, this is another misconception. I'm going to have to do a bad logic video on this. And the bad logic is that you can glean from a photograph what's taking place over a period of time. You cannot. We have no way of knowing why Kyle was looking at the camera. Suppose that the person that was taking the camera shot said, hey, Kyle, look this way. Kyle turns, snapshot. Okay? Maybe Kyle just happened to be looking to the left at the moment he took the snapshot. Or perhaps the man took about 30 snapshots and chose the one that had Kyle looking at him. Is that possible? Especially if the kid has been accused of killing people. Let's see here now. I have about 30 pictures in my compilation here, digital of course, and this Kyle Rittenhouse dude has shot a whole bunch of people, and which one should I choose? Well, here's one where he's looking at me. Gee, that sounds like the one I would select. And also, if this was pulled off social media, well, which one do you think Kyle is going to post on his Facebook? You think he's going to post the one where he's looking at the wall or looking at the camera? So you cannot draw too much out of a still photograph. And this is where, again, I think I need to do a bad logic video on this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop now. This is a long video. I'm going to, and I don't think you want to watch, 2 hours of this. I'm going to put the rest of this in commentary in subsequent videos. So you get the idea. You have a whole bunch of people here. They're all pretty much elderly except for Randy and his one other guy. And they come from a fairly wide spectrum, but the whole center of the spectrum is a little bit left of center. And again, this I think is just simply because they come from a fairly liberal part of the country. What's important to understand here is they're slowly starting to get the idea that things weren't what they seemed to be or what they were told. Like my video, subscribe to my channel, and pay attention. I'm going to be posting up the rest of these parts here over the next few days.